Hi, Carrie. How's it going?
Great. Thanks so much for having me here, Paul. I'm so excited to connect today.
Absolutely. Carrie, you and I have done a show together prior. I was on your show, and I'm just so grateful for you to come on Intrinsic Mindset and riff with me a little bit today. You are very dedicated to parenting, conscious parenting, mindful parenting, you name it. I really love your content. I've obviously connected with you on Instagram
Yeah.
and really enjoy just your delivery and the words. You are very heart centered, I have to say. So I really want to pay you that compliment for continuing. So thank you. Continue to talk about kids and parenting and those incredible pieces of information.
I really appreciate that. I feel so honored, and I really am passionate about helping our kids grow with the creative sides, keeping that creative energy alive for them so they can go from being conscious kids into conscious adults without having to reconnect with
Oh,
themselves.
beautiful. Yeah. So let's definitely dive into that. We're going to come back to the conscious parenting and things like awakening. And I think I just want to start somewhere. I'm going to call this rudimentary, but it is, but it's not. I think even just things like mindfulness. As parents, we go on this journey and we have these beautiful little bundles of joy and they start growing and figuring it out and stumbling, and we're stumbling along the way. We're probably as confused, if not more confused than them as parents. I think when we're kids, we think that parents just have it all figured out and they know everything. There's some magic rule book that I still haven't seen anywhere. I'm not sure that magic rule book is of how to do it, but we try. We're dedicated, and there's ideas too. I definitely want to hear more. So we have these conceptual thoughts of want to protect our children and protect the
Mm,
sanctity of the environment of the family, and sometimes those aren't just external. Sometimes they're of the mind, internal with us. We have to
mhm.
protect them from our traumas or pasts and our
Yep.
programming. Kind of springboarding from that thought process of even just starting with some mindfulness, understanding where we stand and what we're
Yeah.
delivering. I'd love to just hear your thoughts on that. It's a kind of an indirect question, but I'd
Sure.
like to hear your thoughts.
Yes. And one of the things that pops up for me right away is the phrase, our kids are our biggest teachers. They
Yes.
are our biggest lessons. And I was a child expert before I became a parent. I was a speech therapist and an early intervention speech therapist going into houses, and also was a teacher before that even. So I thought I had all the tools in my pocket. I thought I've got this. It's going to be like, husband, you don't even need to do anything. I've got this all. But I definitely was brought to my knees right from birth, right from having my son. So it's definitely learning to learn, learning to
Sure.
grow, learning to be awake and conscious and connected with our kids. And one of those factors is being brave enough and resilient enough to look at things that may be causing that fear, maybe
Mm,
causing us to overparent or trying to control all of the situations around our kids. Looking at those things that maybe bubble up in us as our children are being raised and as they're growing, even when they're born right away, there can be so much energy that can come with them, so much energy
absolutely.
that we maybe need to heal in ourselves and we don't realize it because you're sleep deprived. It's a brand new thing. You're like, how did they let me take him home from the hospital? I didn't know what I was doing. My husband didn't know what I was doing. So, how did this happen? But really, in that, I was really lucky as a parent. I had spiritual people around me, my mom and my
Mm,
grandmother, and spiritual friends that were like, put away those baby books. Stop
mm.
reading all of this literature telling you all this image of perfection that you need to be, trying to get on the sleep schedule, trying to get on the feeding schedule, trying to
Oh yeah.
control everything in their lives. Throw those out and start connecting with your kid. Follow your kid, connect with yourself. And it's been definitely a learning path because it's not, oh, yes, you just connect once and you're good. It's a continuous situation, right?
Absolutely. The
It's continually
iteration. You're
learning.
just continually iterating and growing through that process. And because you're not the same person that you started with, they're not the same little being that, and then you have
Yeah.
the couple, you have your significant other, and you add
Yes.
another kid, and you create this thing that every day it didn't exist the way it did yesterday. So you're constantly growing and iterating through that.
Yep.
And
And
oh,
you
go
want,
ahead.
sorry, I was going to say, you want to verbalize these pieces to your kids too. In a kid friendly term, you want to show
Mm,
them the authentic version of you. You want to show them what it looks like to have a challenge, to have a
yeah.
struggle. I recently was trying out for a speaking event and I didn't make it and I was really bummed. And my son happened to be in the room with me in the moment that I figured it out. And I had a moment where I was just crying for a second and my son's, what's going on? And I was like, oh, I really wanted this one thing. I put all my marbles in this basket and I thought I was going to get
Yeah.
it, but I didn't get it. And I asked him, what do I do? What do I do, buddy? Do I focus my energy on something else? What do I do? What do you think? And he's like, you keep going. I'm like, yeah, I keep trying. And you
Beautiful.
know what? I'm going to try different next time. I'm going to add, maybe I'll have dad check my speech that I wanted to turn in. Maybe I know there's some pieces of me that I have a hard time writing sometimes. So I'm going to have some help with that. And I'm going to try it again. I'm not going to stop here. I'm going to keep going. So showing those authentic pieces of us and modeling it for them is so important. Do you remember seeing that in your childhood? I don't remember that piece.
I don't need, yeah. And the communication too. And it's not just about like my parents, just even within my generation or our generation is your friends. Everybody has, and I jokingly said the rule book because I was mocking it because of what you just said is you get the books, you have all the friends, like don't do this and don't do that. And everything was a big thing. Everything was a big epic thing, like co-sleeping.
Oh
And
gosh.
I'm trying to think of, I can't even remember all the stuff. Just
Bottles, breast
yeah,
milk. There was
bottles and
so
breast
many
milk and
decisions.
Motrin and like and all these different things. It was just like
Mm-hmm.
endless amounts of things, and everybody had an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like you said too, you're sleep deprived, and as a woman, your body went through a massive
Yep.
trauma and an
Yep.
adjustment, which is an incredible thing unto itself. But you come home, and now you're like, I have this, and I don't. Where do I go, and what do I do? So, but I want to jump into the lessons you were talking about too, of kind of those. I don't really buy into the word necessarily believe the word failure, but just there's hurdles, there's bypasses, there's stumbling, there's those teaching points. And those are the beauty and that what really propels us and our souls and with the growth are those points, but showing them how to manage that, to manage the disappointment, to manage there's anger times we get upset with stuff and how are we they're watching how we manage that situation,
Mm-hmm.
how we overcome our pains and fears. And when we get knocked off the horse, do we get back up or is it something that we crumble? And that was what I said too before. Like some of it's about protecting them from some of our stuff, but that's some of the programs we hear.
Mm-hmm.
It's just having those inner silence voice before we speak, before we approach it. And what's the lesson? And now there's times too, I will say, I'm ranting a little bit here because I'm just thinking of the dad and working with it. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know what the right thing to do is. I'm like, am I teaching a lesson? Am I being a good example? There's a time to fight. There's a time to be silent, all these things. And I use the fight lightly, but there's a time to stand up for yourself. And there's a time to just let other people just have something and just allow them. You don't need to prove people wrong. And where are these lessons? And what are those times? And we're balancing those as individuals for the example of our children and our family unit. It's everything. That is their entire world in that sphere. So,
Yeah, I think when you're talking about failure, that is a hard word. And yeah, I don't use that word. I think I use like opportunity for growth
mhm.
or that wasn't the right place and the right timing. Actually, using this time where I failed this past week when I figured out that one piece, it was an opportunity. It was really funny because I was looking at Louisa Hay's or Hay House
Yeah,
Productions
sure.
Instagram, and they had the choose a card for you. Which card are you drawn to? And I picked one card and I looked at it and it said, this card is going to be for your business. And it was like, tune in to see what you really want in your business in this moment. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try and I'm going to just do some intuitive journaling. I love to use intuitive journaling for myself as a guide. And so I sat down and I was writing and I heard, do you want to do live speaking? No. Do you like
Mm,
doing pre
yeah,
video speaking? Yes. This is my jam. I
yeah.
can have my energy. I'm an empath. So, being in this giant space with all of these people, it's harder for me to share my message because I'm getting in my head. I'm having a hard time connecting. It's harder for me to hear the messages I'm wanting to say.
Mhm.
So, it was like, did I really want that thing that I failed at? No, I didn't really want it. So, maybe that energy that I sent out there was self sabotage. But teaching our kids these steps of reflecting, right?
Right.
Teaching our kids these steps of, did my heart really want that? You can turn these learning lessons that you're doing for yourself into lessons you can do for your kids. It's thinking
Yeah.
about the right place, the right time, the right way to describe it to I have a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old. How do we describe these scenarios to our kids? And
Yeah.
they're definitely listening. I'm not sure if
Oh,
you're
yeah.
familiar with Dr. Lisa Miller. She is a research psychologist. I think she worked at Columbia University. She has a book called The Spirited Child, and
Okay.
it's research supporting how our children are born connected and seeking out spirituality when they're
Hmm.
born. So there's out different, and it can be different kinds of spiritual foundations, religious, non-religious, spiritual base. She doesn't really dive into that so far with what I've been reading, but she talks so much about how our kids are born connected to nature, born
Hmm.
asking these deep questions and wanting to understand life and like the philosophies that we maybe think about when we're 40 and we're going through our midlife times that we evaluate for ourselves. But these kids are born and they're asking these deep questions. My 6-year-old asked, "Why are we here? How did we get here?
Right.
Why do things?" Is like her favorite thing
Yeah.
she loved to ask. She was,
And
but
sometimes they
yeah,
have a deep they even have a deep understanding of it, like a deeper
yes,
understanding in many cases than us.
yeah,
Like there's those times too. And I wanted to jump on some, or kind of add on
yes,
something you
please
said there
go.
too, is the idea too is that what came to me at one point too was like kind of the words are words. So I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
get lost in the words, but protecting the
Yep.
magic or
Mm,
the connection to spirit or whatever that version of it is. And
yes.
it's really just the almost kind of the reductive sense of this three-dimensional world is going to have no shortage of rule sets. I don't know why this keeps coming up in our conversation, or at least with me out here, but it's like these rule sets fit in the box, and you do this, you do the schoolings and you do the jobs and you do the things and you fit in the boxes, and it's going to have no shortage of that. So there's these times in these younger years, even as they grow and get into their teens, this is my view, is that I believe as parents, we need to protect the magic of some of that stuff. And don't be so quick to be able to try to put structure around it or overly
Mhm.
concerned about what the world's going to think of them because you're going to imply that guilt, those
Mm,
observable views. Now they're going to curtail their communication, their actions around that to avoid the expansion, avoid the trying to, like you were trying for the speaking thing. And maybe it's not your thing, but at least it's a trying thing and your kids see the trying and
mhm.
they need to try things. That's some of this stuff, being playful, being adventurous, feeling the confidence and the courage to express yourself, or I'm just going to use the word try again because it really is
Mhm.
calling. Not everything's going to resonate, not everything's going to align, and that's okay. But once kids go silent or they stop trying, there's something deep there.
Yeah.
That's some of that diminished, some of that light starts to dim a little bit,
Mhm. I think
and then
that's
go ahead.
where you use the term conscious too, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, for sure.
staying conscious, staying connected to their hearts or their intuition or their soul, the mind body soul connection.
Hmm.
As you've talked about in your own version too, I think you speak of a lot. Protecting the magic, I think for my husband and I, we always say we want to raise our kids in the 90s, which is basically pre-internet era, right? We
Sure.
want our kids to be kids longer. We want them to play outside. We want them to not be on devices. We want
Yeah.
them to seek human connection and be present at dinner time and sit and have a chat and not be focused on watching TV. Maybe some families have TV in the background, which isn't what my husband and I focus on, but also teaching our kids to be connected still is keeping them outside of the box of perfection.
Hmm.
And I was thinking when you were talking about that magic, keeping that magic alive, keeping them children longer, when we're on devices, when we're on, you can hear Dr. Gabor Mate, or I think it was Mate, was talking about, oh no, it might have been somebody else. I think it was Mel Robbins. I was listening and there was a neuropsychologist and he was talking about our dopamine levels and
Hmm.
how we have like a bank of dopamine in the morning. We recharge from the night. We have a bank of dopamine. If we get on social media and we're going through social media in the morning as adults, we're getting those dopamine hits right away. And then you have
Yeah.
none for the rest of your day. So if we think
Interesting.
about that as kids, if they're watching a crazy show with these flashy, oh my gosh, my son was watching Batman Legos and it was like flashy movement. I'm like, oh my gosh, buddy, I really don't like this for your heart. This is really intense. We're going to finish this. And then we're going to think about maybe next time trying a different movie because
Yeah.
those dopamine hits, it's like they get that craving, right? That now move faster. And they're getting into that mindset. They're not connecting with their hearts. So when we say protect the magic, I think it's that connection to that heart that's not
Yeah.
getting into your mind, wanting that quick hit of the dopamine that your brain is wanting. And so being a child longer is keeping them in that state of spiritual greatness,
Hmm.
spiritual
Yeah.
expansion,
Right.
spiritual questioning.
Yeah. The connection, the creation energy, and some of the adding to that as well with the dopamine. I've noticed when my boys will watch like YouTube shorts because it's
Oh,
very
yeah.
quick, very quick. I'll be honest with you, even
Yeah.
when I watch stories on Instagram and I'm like, ding, 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 it's these dopamine. So I think there's another level to that too. And I don't know if you've heard the term
Mhm.
like amygdala hijacking, or there's just cognitive
Mhm.
hijacking,
Yep.
in our brains. And that's what these, a lot of the quick stuff or the internet and the video games and some of the
Yep.
movies and things like that. I'll be honest with you too. It really is. They're taking over the thought process. You're giving over the thought process, and this thing is projecting what your brain is focused on. So it's very
Mhm.
powerful in that sense of those cognitive hijackings. And if kids, I think, are exposed to that now, I'm not a neuroscience or anything else, but they're more irritable, they're crankier, a little bit short tempered, and then they lose motivation too. It's okay, let's go do a puzzle, let's do a game, let's do something
Mm.
else, draw a picture, and it just sucks the life out of them for the rest of the day. If they did
Yep.
video games in the morning, done for the day. They don't recover from that. Now, that's just my observation with my kids, but I've heard similar things with other parents.
Yep.
And so that's the stuff you're talking about too, is we really drain the tank and there's not
Mhm.
much left, and you lose some of the drive with the creation energy, with the inspired thought, with the connection with
Yeah.
the voice, the silent voice in your, and being able to hear that within your heart space. I don't want to say you don't lose it, but you just, the access gets diminished, or the drive and the willingness
Mhm.
to go deep again. And the
Yeah.
kids are already there. It's
Yeah.
almost like they get pulled from it. They're quicker to the heart space than I think we are as adults in many
Oh,
cases.
yeah.
And maybe it's me being generalizing, and
No,
that's not
no.
always the best, but I just think they're already living there, and this world pulls them into the cognitive side of it, and too much exposure. So that's me being a little preachy and a little bit, that's just me sharing on that. So I'll stop there. But I mean, if you had any other thoughts on
I
that.
think there is one other piece I was thinking is as we're connecting more, and if we don't protect that heart space for our
Mm-hmm.
kids and we get into that mind space, we're growing up too fast. We're not
Yeah,
getting
that
that
too.
childhood
Great point.
experience. We're not getting that time to be ourselves and figure out who we are as a
Yeah.
human and growing into the authentic version of us.
Yeah.
And if we don't have that exposure and that practice and that time to be fun, creative, if you're getting into those overthinking spaces, those places of your brain, I feel like there's more time to overthink. There's more time to have your brain be overworking,
Yeah.
which we don't want to see that, right? As they're going through and having that overworking mind, a lot of that I've noticed with my kids is when their brain is overworking, there's often times where they want to be more fitting in that perfect box. They want to have
Mm,
more perfection. They have a harder
yeah.
time.
The
Yes.
external.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, what they look like, how their things, as you get into your mind more and more, you're more
Absolutely.
critical of yourself. So we
Yep.
don't want to see that in our kids. We want them to not be fearful of critiquing themselves or to having that overactive mind that's saying things to them that we don't want them to hear. We don't want them to start those habits now. We want them to
Absolutely.
stay conscious, stay heart centered. And also, part of that is, and this is diving into another subject, like just that mind, body, soul connection,
Hmm.
teaching those pieces with their kids. I've started doing a couple little 1 minute, because I know people love those shorts, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I started doing a couple little 1 minute ideas of here's how you can connect with your kids. And one of them was going outside, sitting in the driveway and having your bowl of chalk, right? And you
Hmm.
can even do a mind body connection practice of I'm going to choose what is my heart and my hand feeling like going toward. Ooh, it feels like it really wants this green. Why am I
Hmm.
thinking of the green? Green makes me think of grass, makes me think of trees. Ooh, it's spring. I'm starting to smell the grass. Or I hear, speaking of trees, I hear the wind in the trees. Just bringing your consciousness to the things around you and being present
Yeah.
in that moment. I love thinking of exercises we can do with that with our kids.
Oh, I love that. I love that calling to it too. Either the color or a design or something. What shape am I feeling? What color am I feeling? Those are great. Those visceral type of
Yeah.
experiential bringing of this world. And I was thinking too, when you were talking about too, there is generally a correlation of when you're in the fear mindset or when you're overly concerned with the exterior. As we're living in fear in the
Yeah.
heart space, it pulls us in, and it puts more thought of the exterior. As the more our heart space expands, the less we're concerned with the external, and then it's more
Yes.
about the integrities, the loves, those things. So when we're in those safe spaces, we're able to expand ourselves. But when we're in the fears and the concerns, the external world has those allowances, and we're much more concerned with things we can't change. There's a lot of stuff that we can't change, and we can get disrupted. And if I'm upset about something, I'm just trying to think of something externally, the things I can't change. It's a lot of wasted energy. And
Mm.
those are lessons for the kids, but to bring them back into the heart space, and the exercise of bringing that in so that they'll be able to have those kind of tools and the strength to be able to center themselves as they realize and recognize that they're going into fear or survival or kind of root chakra. They'll be able to have those kind of tools in their work chest there to
Hmm.
be like, nope, let's just take this back out, and or recognition or awareness of being in these fear-based sets.
Yep.
So
So, yeah, I think, oh, it's so important. I was just having this image of like my 3-year-old daughter and the outfits she used to put together because
mm,
she would just go in, ooh, I love a skirt, I love a top, like not thinking about how they go together, not thinking about what it looks like when you go out of
fashion
your
rules, you didn't
house.
teach her proper fashion rules.
They're going in all heart. So it's, I really want to wear my rain boots. I really want to wear
Yeah,
my skirt. So I have a picture of her in a tutu with a bucket hat and rain boots. And that was her
that's
at
beautiful.
3, just, going down the slide in her tutu. But there was a point where I said, sometimes I like to match. And I did that little mom moment. And I wish I could take it back
No, it's
because
okay.
now but also when you have those mishaps, you have to give yourself
Mm,
some compassion and put your hand over your heart and release that. And also, that's a time for learning, right? Why did
absolutely.
mom feel she had to do that? It goes back generations
Yeah,
of perfection of mothers in my family.
absolutely.
We can't leave the house unless we have our hair and our makeup and our clothing. And that was energy in my family. And I had to heal that and move on from that. So I'm still working on
Yeah.
that myself.
Nice. Those are two great catalysts. I think some of those are really important. Like you mess up, and then you have that recognition, parent. So now I've changed the behaviors. They've seen us do the one thing and then do the other things.
Mhm.
Because as your daughter grows
Mhm.
up, she's going to have friends, and they're going to tell her what's cool or what's not.
Yep.
And
Yep.
some won't be cool. They won't use the word cool then, I'm sure, but it'll be something lit or whatever.
Fetch.
Yeah. I don't know. My
I
boys are
will.
saying things like Sigma and all these
Cute.
terms, which I love. I think that they're funny. But somebody's going to give her that, and then to see that,
Yes.
oh, she's not going to remember that time that you told her to match the
Yes.
bottoms and the tops or the hats or whatever. But there'll be recognition of
Society.
her being
Yep.
confident and understanding that, like, no, I had the chance to express myself. It's not a deep requirement program that's
Yeah.
running there. It's okay to mismatch. And there is a sense of, and I don't want to get lost in the clothes, but I think it's just an example of
Sure.
something because that is an
Sure.
outward expression of how we show up in the
Yeah.
world too. And like I find myself as I got older and more comfortable too, is I love mismatched stuff. Like when I like
Great.
networking events, I do like one color sport and my shirt doesn't match my vest or something. Like I just like I love the Mod Podge of clothing. And I didn't have that as a younger because we're just staying on this subject here for a moment. And at
Mm.
one point too, I would have probably been like with my boys, I would have been just like, don't wear that, don't wear this brand or
Mm.
something. I might have
Mhm.
been in
Mhm.
those windows, so you can see those. But it's a great expression, I think,
It's
from even the clothing. That's just in
yeah.
how you're presenting yourself.
And thinking about that in a different term, my son, whenever he's trying something, he feels empowered and he's so
Mm,
empowered at it that like he's trying basketball right now. And between you and I and everybody listening, he's probably not the number one basketball player, but he comes off and did you see that? I just rebounded that. Like, when I go to high school, I'm going to play basketball. That's how good I
I
am, you
love it.
guys. I found one of my things. And my husband's like, dude, I don't know if he's like the best. What do we say right now? I feel like his ego is it getting too big? And I'm like, society is going to take care of it for us.
Exactly.
Right
Yeah.
now, I
There's
want
a
to
whole lifetime of
empower it.
Yeah.
Yes,
There's a
he's
whole lifetime of
9.
external influences that will squash our egos and tell us what's
Yes.
right or what's wrong.
Yes.
The self expression and him being a lion in his own stance is amazing. And it's really interesting too, because like with the competition and stuff like that, some kids really just so you can see some recess and then some don't care or they're the ones that are picking the dandelions in the field or something like that. But then some kids are just like, oh, I'm going to crush it. Oh, and it was like, where does that come from?
Mhm.
I don't know. My boys are a little more passive with some stuff. They really enjoy soccer
Mhm.
and things like that, but they didn't really pick up that I'm the king of the
Right.
world and everything.
Right.
It's just kind of, my younger one would be the one picking dandelions in the
Yeah.
field, but
Yeah. And that's my
picking
son too. If
dandelions
somebody
in the
falls
field. But
down, he's helping them up. Like he will stop the game for himself, help the person up, make sure they're okay. And he was the grass picker in soccer. Totally. And that's
yeah,
part of that heart connection, right? We win or lose. I'm helping my friends. I'm having fun. I'm finding some cool dandelions. That's that heart connection still.
funny to stay on that sports one. Not long. It's not a linger point. It's just, because the old school is a very competitive and you do this, you crush it. And I'm not
Mhm.
saying that energy is definitely not gone, but then there was because then there was a criticism for a generation, I think through the millennials or something, and everybody gets a ribbon and everybody's trying and stuff like that. But and then it was just like, and then there's like this other balance to that, and just the expression
Yeah.
and let them go at it and stuff. And I personally I don't know what's right or wrong. I know that I know how my kids respond, and I've seen other kids how they respond. So it is really interesting how those things
Mhm.
through. And there's the very competitive parents, of course, and then the kids learn those behaviors of that's how dad likes me or mom likes me when
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
try really hard in this
Yeah.
capacity. And those are all those other learned behaviors. And but it is
It's
an
interesting.
interesting one, how that
Yep.
expression of the competition or the dominance
Yes.
or something.
When you're sitting in those stands with those parents and you
Yeah,
have the parents, get that rebound, get that
yeah, yeah.
rebound. And you're just, whoa, where did that come from? That's not even your
Right.
kid. That's not your
I know.
kid. Why are you yelling at my
Yeah, I
kid?
know. I
So
know.
I think you still see it. And even in the place where I live, where we're pretty crunchy granola here in this area. So it's interesting. I feel like for my husband and I, we choose not to go on the pendulum. We choose not to go to the extremes. We
Hmm.
like to find that middle ground of not overparenting, not
Yeah,
underparenting, being present and mindful.
yeah,
But yeah, it's interesting when you're sitting in those stands. And the other day, I couldn't help myself. There was a kiddo I could see he was really upset about the scoreboard. And I think his parents may have put like a lot of pressure on him about what the score was. Or
yeah,
if your team is losing, like you're losing, that's part of you and that's your energy and you're losing. So I said to the mom, we were having a little chat and I was just like, oh, I noticed he's really feeling it in his heart. He's really feeling that scoreboard and that team. He's feeling that pressure in him. Poor guy.
yeah,
And so I was trying to soften it for mom a little bit, like soften that a little bit for your
hmm,
kiddo and connect
yeah,
with them and honor the growth that we see. Let's honor
yeah.
the growth we see in whatever we're doing, the growth personally for ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think too, there's something about the exchange of energy. I think this is just one of those good examples, but it applies to really everything,
Definitely. Yep.
scholastics, whatever it is. But
Yep.
I don't necessarily want my kids to be acting for my energy. I want them to figure it
Mhm.
out themselves. And if I implore my energy into this and they're doing it for dad,
Mhm.
I don't really necessarily feel like that's completely the right move too. And I don't really feel it's the right move. So but again, this is my opinion on it. And because I don't necessarily want them to live for somebody else's energy or want to do that. I want them to be self-reliant on that. And maybe they are picking the dandelions or
Mhm.
not picking up in the reading or the math fast enough for their
Yep.
age or
Yep.
whatever versions of that is
Mhm.
in their development. There's those things. They're not going to grow up and necessarily know how to add 2 plus 2 in the
Yeah.
world. They will learn these things. And
Yeah.
so I think rushing and putting the pressure just so I feel that if somebody asks my kid, are you a good mathematician or reader or basketball or whatever, somehow yeah, they're
Mhm.
great.
Or top of the heap, top of the
And I
heap.
think there's just
That's
some of those things too, is I think it's being, maybe where I'm going is being that conscious parent again.
right.
And, and the allowance and the understanding that the world will imply and implore and everything else. There's the rule sets and the influences and what's right and what's wrong and
Yep.
everything, the binary, the good and the bads and all those things. The world will influence them. I think to have them be the strongest version of them to be able to discern and make
Yes.
those own decision points and having the space to feel the colors and feel the shapes and being able to
Mhm.
have that center point to go back to. So those are the great strength points.
And that starts with us, right?
Yeah.
We are the first person they see in life. It depends. But we are that first connection for them,
Yeah.
that first human connection. Even when they're in our womb, they're feeling our energy. They're feeling all of that. So they're looking to you for acceptance. They're looking to you energetically, they're looking to you for love. And if you're coming at it from a heart space, if you've done the work as a parent to stay conscious, to stay spiritual, to stay
Hmm.
connected with yourself, your intuition, then you can come at that in a better version of yourself.
For
That
sure.
takes a lot of work as a
It
parent.
does. Yeah.
And parenting, oh my gosh, it's the hardest freaking job we will ever have. It's rough. It can be there's amazing parts of it, right? There's challenges, but I have started to look at those challenges as, and we had chatted about this, spiritual growth, right? And
Hmm.
healing of ourselves. Those are moments for us to, it's a gift for us, those challenges, because it's, what do I need to learn? What do I need to heal? What fear do I feel bubbling up for myself? If we're not connecting and we're not healing those pieces of ourselves and looking at that as a moment to connect spiritually, then we cannot be in those heart spaces when they're not being the perfect basketball player, when they're not
Yeah.
being the perfect reader, the perfect math star, the top of the heap, as we were joking around with. So, yeah, staying in that spiritual connection and that spiritual place, I'm starting to see. I'm raising two kiddos who are 2E, or twice exceptional is the school term, but I like to use it. I like to say gifted, spirited, and highly sensitive, also termed as neurodiverse. And gifted and talented kids are under the umbrella of neurodiversity. So if you were a
Mhm.
gifted student, I feel like you're gifted in some of your pieces. Even Paul, I know you mentioned challenges with school as a child,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
feel like you have gifted pieces. Maybe intrapersonal, interpersonal are your gifted
Yeah.
pieces. Don't forget that that's my gift.
Absolutely.
I wasn't a scholastically minded, even though I was in some accelerated schooling. Testing was very hard for me, but intrapersonal and interpersonal skills, I'm up there. That's my jam. When you are highly sensitive, highly gifted, all of these pieces, you're coming in. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent.
I love it.
Hope you're following here. This has been my mission this past year when I started Heart to Heart Parents podcast, connecting with other parents that are raising these kids that are coming in. I think it's a lot of millennials, maybe Gen X, raising these kids that are born with this passion for life. These gifts, they can absorb different areas of life very quickly and learn very quickly. But it can also make the brain very active. It can make the brain
Yeah.
very quick. Those synapses are quick, which can
Yeah.
also make being a human really intense. If your brain is overactive, if your brain quickly jumps to fight, flight, freeze, fawn, then it can be harder to hear your heart. These kids that are born with all of these gifts can also be very hindering to be in this human form. It can be really hard on that
Emily.
spirit. It can be hard for them to grow up and stay conscious. When you're growing up with this sensitivity to life and this human experience, it can be really easy to put on these layers of protection to
Hmm.
protect your heart because you have
Yeah.
such a strong connection to that heart. And then when you grow up and you're an adult, sometimes you have all those protections that we then have to remove. So many of us are removing these layers of protection that we put on as millennials and Gen X. And I'm not sure the younger version, but we're having to remove those layers of protection to hear our hearts, to connect with our intuitions and minds. So I'm really hearing that this era that's coming in has so much depth and wisdom, and we just need to help them stay conscious into adulthood so they can be in the versions that you and I, Paul, are at now, but maybe they grow up the whole way there and they don't
Yeah.
have to remove those layers.
Oh, I love it. And you beautifully put, I like the way you talked about the layers and the walls, because there's so many things that we do add those in confusion as we grow. My generation, it wasn't these conversations weren't happening. And obviously the mediums and as far as the internet or anything like that, or even finding conversations like this,
Mm.
there was nowhere to find anything like this. Everybody was in a very 3D, firm,
Yep.
hard, dimensional,
Right.
industrial revolution world. And it was, for myself, just I remember being a very sensitive child, and it was very confusing, feeling very lost, and putting up all these parameters and the sensitivity of I was just going to use the word confusing. It didn't make sense. I was like, it doesn't, it just, you feel this, you see it. And it was just like, and everybody would be like, I don't want to say put you down because it sounds like a little victim thing, but it was a lot of put down through the grade schools and the younger years into the high schools and stuff like that. Cause it's very hard. So yes, you create these personas and all of a sudden you become different characters around other people and you become very good at assimilating to your environment. So
Yes.
when you're not in a strong, secure, safe environment, you hone the ability to become very malleable and a chameleon. So when you see people that are like that, not, don't want to generalize, but sometimes they've developed that ability because they're so sensitive or empathic. They're very easily absorbed and those energies are penetrating and to cope with it. So I like the way you talked about the layers and the walls. So on that subject, but jumping to something that we touched on prior to even talking, was let's talk about the awakening. So let's just say like people awakening or people coming into the exploration of spirituality or just enlightened thought. Let me go in a little bit of a runway here and then pass the mic. So
Sure.
I was just going to say was a couple different things, just put a couple different puzzle pieces and what kind of calls to you and stuff like that. Some could just be one parent in some case or a guardian or whatever that version of that is. And the other one is not on a path of mastery or improvement. Even the word improvement, it almost associates with judgment. It's not even a judgment thing, but you're on this journey of self-mastery. And we all are in our own ways, no matter what we're talking about, we're all on this journey of self-mastery because you can't help, but you're not the same person you were yesterday. So if you have parents that are in an awakening journey or a spiritual guided journey or exploration and openness to talking, the children in this case, like we talked about, they were already there. And maybe we've already implied some of those layers and walls they've had to build too. So now your family dynamics changing. And one is could be that maybe not everybody in the family is on the same page and on the same path. Another is maybe everybody is going together, and that's a beautiful sphere to have, like you've talked about you and your husband being aligned in that way. And but these awakening points and are very powerful times. Now, the only thing I'm going to add to this too is that sometimes what can happen is we go from one rule set or dogmatic thought process into another one. And even though it's under the guise of a spiritual journey, it could be very strong modalities with rule sets and everything else. Now we're implying and imploring another set of thought process and belief structures. But there's really a center of coming back home to our heart space. And we get to do that journey as we go and we fumble and we tumble and we fall like little toddlers as adults. We learn. And then we get to bring all those lessons back to this heart space, this home space as we get older. And that's really where the beauty is. And we try and explore and all these other things. So I laid out a couple different things there, but we talked about it. And I just want you can ignore everything I said, or if there's something I would like you to talk a little bit about that awakening experience as a parent.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up like a family dynamic where somebody is not on the path with the other person. And it makes me curious. I've heard of this, and I actually was talking to somebody recently where somebody was in the family dynamic. One parent was on a spiritual journey and had gone through a lot of awakening pieces, and the other parent didn't want to talk about any of it. Doesn't believe in any of it. But it was interesting because one of the people had mentioned the person that is on the journey had mentioned the person that is not on the journey. Are they already there? Are they
Mm,
already living in a spiritual existence?
yeah.
And maybe they don't label it. So maybe they're bringing up mindful pieces in their everyday and they don't even know it. That's just how they live. I almost think of like an animal. I was thinking of a horse because I did a family constellations recently and they had horses there and it was really cool. And a horse is just in that present moment, right? It's just sometimes they let
Yeah.
go of
Yeah.
they'll do the brrr, and they're letting go of energy. They're passing energy and
Yeah.
they're just in that moment and they're not labeling it as I'm letting go
Thank
of
you.
energy right now.
A horse is not labeling itself as a horse or an enlightened horse. It's not labeling
Yes.
itself. It's
It's just
experiential.
present.
It's existing. And
Yes.
I love that. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I love
No,
that you
it's okay.
said that there are many people living this heart-centered space in their own
Mhm.
way, and they
Yeah.
haven't put a parameter or an explanation or a box or an over definition and thing. And that's why I was careful.
Yeah.
I wanted to add that about the
Yeah.
structural dogma, because
Yeah.
sometimes people try to jump in these structural dogmas. I kind of joke personally because couple different things. It's like different modalities and stuff. I believe we need to
Mhm.
explore all different modalities in our
Yep.
own way and have
Yep.
fun with it. But once it starts to become rigid and the only way, take a question to question yourself again. I jokingly say, even with this podcast stuff, my kung fu has no form because I don't want to be, everybody says you got to be neat. You got to tell people, we're not going off on a tangent about podcasting, but it's that kind of, you need to define yourself. So somebody
Uh,
knows how to meet with you and talk to you. The more form I try to put around something, I don't want to be overly rigid. And I think a
oh,
lot
yeah.
of people capture those genius moments and those creative moments when they're not really thinking about the structure or labeling
Yes.
themselves.
Yes.
That's when you tap into some of those beautiful points. So I wanted to add that as you were
Love
saying
it.
that.
Yeah, I actually was going through, so I've been going through my own version of spiritual awakening and adding the podcast. And it's been like this whole evolving process of growth. And with the parenting pieces, it's all just evolving. And
Mhm.
I wasn't going to add the spiritual piece to my podcast because I was scared, right? I had fear. If I add the word spiritual, what does that do? Does it send off, oh, but the niche, I have to like, what do I do with the niche?
Or the
And I
cool
had
kids
like,
won't like me now. I won't get the big guests on here because they won't.
I don't
Yeah.
want to think about it. That 3D version, right? The
Yep.
3D world. So then I had this reaction, this physical, just I locked up and I was like this. It was a couple weeks ago. And my husband's, what is going on with you? And I finally figured it out. Oh, I have to add the word spiritual. And my body wants it out there. And it locked
Beautiful.
up on me. And that's part of this spiritual awakening is understanding what is going on in my life. And when you talk about the partners, my husband is, I swear he's going through his own version, and it's not related to the parenting side. His is in his career side and what
Mhm.
he's going through and
Yeah, those
the
are
things
tough.
going
Those are
on.
tough. Ties into the supply that takes care of the family. That's the external security
Oof,
of those are tough journeys.
a
That's
lot of energy there, right? 3D, 5D. We
absolutely.
were just talking
And it's your
about.
entire energy. It's your security system. It's deep levels of survival. Is there enough wood
Ooh,
chopped to get through the winter and enough pickled beans? Is there just enough, supply
yeah,
and
yeah,
resource? That's your resource. And it really gets you at those deep DNA levels. And those are powerful journeys. Yeah.
yeah. I think that hits your fight, flight.
I'm sorry to
Mhm.
jump on this because it's
No,
exciting, but it was
please
just we
do.
hit them in different arenas. There's the career and the money, there's the
Yeah.
love, there's the
Mhm,
relationships, there's the
mhm,
family, there's all
mhm.
these different elements. You mentioned the speaking thing and the revelation of our communication. You're like, wait a second, maybe being on a stage isn't really my jam. My jam is this
Mhm.
communication online and one on one with people or small groups or whatever that
Yep.
is for you.
Yep.
Those are beautiful points and those are those journeys in the different arenas. I think we show up in some arenas like total just
Mhm.
incredibly powerful beings and in other ones we're completely shattered and broken. That's the beauty of us as humans. We're so complex. We could show up shattered and completely empowered in the same setting. You can
Mm.
show up happy and sad all at the same time. We're these beautiful messes of creatures that have these
Yep.
creative abilities.
I think like tying it all back together, Paul, is you and I had to go through these journeys and we're
Mhm.
going through these journeys and we're healing and growing and we are doing the work now so our kids don't have to do it later for
Yeah,
themselves. We
absolutely.
are doing it now and we're reflecting that in our kids. You and your wife, your partner are working so your kids can grow up consciously. It's part of
Absolutely.
your mission and what you did.
Environments, you create those allowances,
Mhm.
and they're going to have their own hurdles. They're going to have their
Yep.
own times of learning.
Yep.
But for us as parents to be able to bring them to, I don't really like the word level or location, whatever that is, because
Mhm.
again, there's an implying of judgment there of right and
Sure.
wrong. But there's still to give them that potential leg up or the ability to center themselves is an incredible thing. And there's times too in my life where I'm struggling and over strife with the family, not of the family, but the thing with the career stuff or something
Yeah.
externally that supplies and takes care of our family. I'll be at very anxiety over this. And then there's times where I'm thinking
Mhm.
like, I almost have that instinct where I'm like, you know what? Maybe this isn't totally my lesson. Yes, I
Mhm.
have to deal with it, but my kids are seeing this too. And maybe this is I'm creating the treads for them and burning off some of this stuff, the ancestral traumas or the
Mhm. Mhm.
generational programs. There's some of that stuff that to your exact point, is that I'm burning off, I'm burning through. So those recognitions.
Yes.
So I say it as I, but I mean it for anybody that's listening. Is us just have those recognitions that maybe it's not just you. Maybe you really are doing a bigger picture here for you and your family.
And one other takeaway thought, people can take it or leave it. I'm just going to share it. I was doing a family constellations last weekend, which is where they work on like that generational ancestry energy and how it
Mhm.
can come out in your kids. And your kids don't even know, they don't even know anything about what happened, but they feel the energy and they expel it. And sometimes it can be like, anger was
Mhm.
what was going on in our house. When we went in and before we started, I love the family constellations facilitator. She said, these kids being born today, they are coming and they are strong in their missions. They are
Mhm.
strong in their energy. They are strong in their events that are going to be happening in their lives. And we are more of a facilitator as a
Mhm.
parent
Yeah.
than a protector, right? We're facilitating, we're trying to help them become the best version of themselves. We're teaching them life's lessons. And I always say I tried to keep the spice in my daughter, my 6-year-old daughter. I tried to keep her spice, but I also tried to keep her in a human space. I have to teach her the human pieces while letting
Mhm.
that fire continue to burn. So
Absolutely.
it was interesting. She said, you can't protect your child from some of the pieces that they have to learn. Their soul has already made this contract. They already have these things lined out. And it takes off some of that pressure.
It
I
does, yeah.
have to protect them from everything. There's things they do have to experience.
Yeah. We have to allow that. So, Carrie, that was absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for this time, these insights. And what's the best way for somebody to get a hold of you or reach out to
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. So I have hearttoheartlife.com. I have a little freebie in there right now that's fun. It's a guided meditation to help parents reconnect with their passion
Love
for
it.
themselves. So that's on there. It's a little freebie if they want that. And then I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. I'm Heart to Heart Parents Podcast, also on Apple and Spotify. Thanks so much for having me, Paul. It's so fun to connect
Beautiful.
with you
Yeah.
again.
Thank you for joining me.